Welcome back into Sports Nightly. I'm Jessica Cootie and excited for another check-in with the president, Dr. Jeffrey Gold, as we have all throughout this spring. We doing every couple weeks a check-in with the president. So thank you for coming back on with us again.
Always a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, we always, got to talk about sports first, and here on Sports Nightly, and it's been quite the month for Husker athletics. Wrestling had a great showing in Philadelphia. We have Danny Busboom Kelly kind of getting her footing here as the head coach with volleyball. Just, I guess let's start with volleyball and your thoughts on Danny Busboom Kelly and taking over the reins of Husker volleyball.
I guess as succinctly as I can say it, the right person at the right time. There is no question, having now met with her several times, learned about her amazing history, the connections to the state of Nebraska with her family here, the experience that she had playing for us, coaching for us, and of course her amazing experiences in Louisville. As I said, just the right person at the right time. And frankly, I think it's the way Coach Cook wanted to see this transition. This was all about respecting his wishes to be sure that he felt comfortable in transitioning his legacy in the right way. And I feel really good that we were able to respect him, and will continue to, by the way.
How proud were you of the showing of Husker wrestling at the NCAA championships with a couple of individual national titles and the NCAA runner-up?
Unbelievable. I think, I don't know the history as well as you and some in the audience might, but I think this is one of the best performances the wrestling team has ever had. Obviously made national news, literally coast to coast in the United States. And kudos to Coach Manning and all of his great expertise. And I look forward to congratulating him and the team just as soon as we can get together.
All right, well, let's switch gears now. The legislature is in session. Budget discussions are critical. What's the university's approach this year?
Well, the Board of Regents created a very specific, a very what I would call middle-of-the-road kind of request back last August. It was 3.5% core budget increase and a number of other items, some capital items, some planning items, et cetera. The 3.5% was exactly what we were asked to do by the State Fiscal Office, and that's where we have stood ever since. Now, I had the opportunity to testify before the Appropriations Committee back on February 25th, and that sort of feels like a million years ago now. But we had a number of individuals, including myself, who had an opportunity to talk about the value of supporting the university, the importance of the consistency of the funding, what it means for not just the future workforce of the state, all of the services we provide, think healthcare, think agriculture, think, anything and everything that we do, let alone what happens on the gridiron and on the hardwood, be very blunt, but also the economic impact. And that's critically important as well. And, to have at least a 10-to-1 return for every dollar invested in the university is returned to the state. Message I've been sharing is that is one of the best things that the state can do with the resources we have. And the more critical the state budget becomes, the more important it is to invest in things that have a significant return. We all know that from our own families and what we choose to do. And as days get tougher, with the ups and downs in the markets, and I'm well aware of the impact of that, you have to go to what your safe is. There's what we call in the market trading business a migration to safety. And migration to safety for us means investing in the university.
You've talked about the economic impact of projects like Project Health. How significant is that initiative for Nebraska?
Well, it's critically important for us because, one, it is the primary venue where the healthcare professionals that work across the state, border to border, are educated. And the ability to maintain a quality learning environment to boost production of healthcare workforce, particularly for the needs in rural Nebraska, is absolutely essential. Secondly, it's the site where the overwhelming majority of bioscience research that impacts patients is done. All of the clinical trials in cancer, in heart disease, in Alzheimer's, in Parkinson's, and so many other areas. That's where, over 90% of that work is done. And then finally, huge, as you said, economic impact. large employment, billions of dollars of gain to the taxpayers of the state of Nebraska over time. We're thinking, roughly between 5,000 and 8,000 new high-paying, stable jobs in the state. That's what we really need to stabilize the economy and to continue to grow. And again, it's all about investing in areas that will grow.
You had mentioned the research efforts and that they're central to Project Health. Why is this so important for Nebraska?
Well, you think about it, the cutting-edge treatment for cancer, for heart disease, for, work we're doing in Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, in almost every area, work we're doing in public health, that directly affects every Nebraskan, because there's conventional therapy, the best of the best that occurs in our community hospitals and our critical access hospitals across the state. But as we all know from loved ones in our own families and close friends, that sometimes that's not enough, and they need to get put on clinical trials. And some of these clinical trials, are successful. The majority of them, by the way, are, because they're all approved by the FDA and by other institutional groups, and they extend life and they save lives. I can't tell you how many people I've known who had access to a clinical trial, by the way, as part of being in the Big Ten. The Big Ten Cancer Clinical Trial Group is well known for having access to amazing clinical trials for patients that literally save their lives. And, we know all too well, unfortunately, from the loss of Greg Sharp, that there's still work to be done. He fought valiantly to overcome pancreas cancer, and unfortunately, the cancer won at the end of the day. But we need to do something to change that, and that's where research and clinical trials become so important.
Your background is obviously in the medical field. How much, with everything that you have to balance, do you stay invested in all of this and staying up to date? How do you have the time to do that and stay up to date on all of making sure you know all about all the stuff that's going on, all the research?
Well, you're so kind to ask that question, and the answer is pretty simple. I get to work with amazing people every day, and one of the important characteristics of leadership is to surround yourself by the right people who share your values, your ethics, your approach, your drive, if you will, and then let them do their thing and stay out of their way. Micromanagement is not a good thing. So I try to stay up to date what's going on, but I also try very hard not to micromanage and just to put the right people in the right place and let them do their thing.
Oh, great stuff. All right. Well, finally, we got to wrap up with asking another sports question. You were able to go to Fort Worth, down to Texas, and watch Nebraska women's basketball in the first round of the NCAA tournament. How was that? I know it was a heartbreaking loss, but you've been a big supporter of that program all season long.
Well, absolutely. I've been to many of the home games, and I was in Fort Worth. And I'll tell you, the energy was absolutely amazing. The team gave it its all. Amy was in it from the very first minute to the last minute, and I have a lot of optimism for the years that are ahead. But I'll tell you, it was a heartfelt loss. I'm sure we all saw the videos of the team coming off the field. I stood there with Troy and high-fived every member of the team. But I know they gave it their all, and they will in the future.
Absolutely. Great stuff as always. Thank you so much once again for joining us here on Sports Nightly.
Always a pleasure. Look forward to next time.
Absolutely. And Dr. President Jeffrey Gold joining us here on Sports Nightly. We've got to step aside for a break. More of the show coming up after this.